Karen's eyes narrowed. These people didn't understand the burden of leadership, the weight of maintaining property values and community standards. Someone had to enforce the rules, even if it made her unpopular. Especially if it made her unpopular, that meant she was doing her job right. Emergency HOA meeting, she declared, checking her backup phone for the time. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. sharp. We need to discuss bridge repair, pool contamination protocols, and the Henderson violation. You can't call an emergency meeting about your own accident, protested Lisa Henderson, who'd been surprisingly calm about her pool becoming a parking garage. I can, and I will. Article 7, Section 3 of our HOA bylaws clearly states, "Nobody cares about your bylaws, Karen." The voice came from somewhere in the crowd, but Karen couldn't identify the speaker. It didn't matter. They all thought it. That night, Karen sat in her immaculate living room, surrounded by binders full of HOA regulations, violation photographs, and compliance documentation. Her laptop displayed 17 different tabs of local municipal codes and property law websites. If the neighborhood wanted to challenge her authority, she'd remind them exactly who held the power in Willowbrook Estates. She pulled up the HOA's master insurance policy and began cross-referencing coverage clauses with the bridge incident. Somewhere in these documents was her vindication. Somewhere in these rules was proof that she'd done everything correctly. Her doorbell rang at 11:47 p.m. Karen peered through the window to see a process server holding an envelope. Karen Weatherby, you've been served. Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association versus Karen Weatherby. Emergency removal hearing scheduled for Friday. As Karen closed the door, envelope trembling in her hands, she realized her neighbors had done something she'd never expected. They'd used her own beloved HOA rules against her. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center hadn't seen this many residents since the Great Christmas Light controversy of 2019. Every folding chair was occupied, with overflow crowds standing along the walls and clustered near the door. Karen sat alone at the front table, her emergency binder open to Section 12.3, removal of board members for cause. She'd spent the past 2 days preparing her defense, armed with precedent cases, procedural technicalities, and a PowerPoint presentation that definitively proved her actions were not only justified but necessary for community safety. Her backup laptop hummed quietly beside a stack of laminated evidence packets she prepared for each homeowner. The motion before us tonight, announced Gary Petrosky, the HOA's reluctant vice president, is the immediate removal of Karen Weatherby as president due to gross negligence, destruction of community property, and, he paused, consulting his notes, creating a public nuisance. A ripple of nervous laughter swept through the crowd. Karen stood, smoothing her replacement pantsuit, navy blue this time, more authoritative. Point of order, she declared, her voice carrying across the packed room. This proceeding violates Article 15, which requires a 30-day notice period for removal hearings. You've given me 72 hours. Karen. Sarah Chen called from the fourth row. You literally drove through a bridge and into someone's pool. We're invoking the emergency clause. The emergency clause applies only to situations involving immediate physical danger or financial liability exceeding TOUs and DOAAs, shouted Bob Martinez, waving a contractor's estimate. That's what it's going to cost to replace the bridge, resurface the Henderson's pool, and repair the landscaping damage. Your little photography session just cost us 50 grand. The room erupted in heated murmurs. Karen felt her carefully prepared arguments crumbling like the bridge railing under her Lexus. But she'd faced hostile crowds before. She'd weathered the Great Mailbox Hype Rebellion of 2022 and the underground sprinkler system uprising of 2023. The bridge was a liability waiting to happen, she said, clicking to her first PowerPoint slide. My analysis shows structural deficiencies dating back to. Nobody wants to see your PowerPoint, Karen, someone yelled from the back. The Henderson violation still stands. Karen continued, undeterred. Rules are rules, regardless of circumstances. If we start making exceptions, Karen Weatherby's pristine white Lexus crashed through the wooden bridge railing with a thunderous crack, plunging 15 feet into the Hendersons' kidney-shaped pool below. The impact sent a geyser of chlorinated water cascading over the manicured lawn, soaking 3 horrified neighbors who'd been documenting her latest HOA enforcement rampage on their phones. 20 minutes earlier, Karen had been standing on that very bridge, clipboard in hand, measuring the exact height of the Hendersons' new deck railing. 36.2 inches. She'd announced to no one in particular, her laser measuring device beeping triumphantly. The Willowbrook Estates HOA covenant clearly states 36 inches maximum. This is a flagrant violation. The bridge, built in the 1980s when the development first opened, had always been more decorative than structural. It spanned the narrow creek that wound through several backyards, connecting the main walking path to the tennis courts. Karen had crossed it thousands of times during her 5-year tenure as HOA president, but never while backing up to get the perfect angle for violation photographs. "Ma'am, maybe you should watch where you're," young Tommy Henderson had started to say, but Karen had silenced him with her signature death glare. "Children should be seen and not heard," she'd snapped, still focused on her camera. "And tell your parents they have exactly 72 hours to bring this monstrosity into compliance." Now, as Karen sat waist-deep in pool water, her usually immaculate blonde bob dripping like a wet mop, she could hear the unmistakable sound of multiple phones recording her humiliation. Her clipboard floated beside her like a waterlogged life preserver, the violation notice she'd been writing completely illegible. "Are you hurt?" Mrs. Chen called from the pool deck, though her barely contained smirk suggested she wasn't particularly concerned about Karen's well-being. Karen stood up, her beige pantsuit clinging to her like a wet paper bag. Pool water cascaded from her pockets, along with her car keys, phone, and the 17 violation citations she planned to distribute that afternoon. "I'm fine," she said through gritted teeth, her voice carrying the same authority she used during HOA meetings, though significantly dampened by her current circumstances. But Karen wasn't fine. As she looked up at the splintered remains of the bridge railing, then at the growing crowd of neighbors emerging from their houses with cameras and knowing looks, she realized something had fundamentally shifted. These people weren't just annoyed with her anymore. They were delighted by her downfall. "Don't worry, Karen," called out Bob Martinez from across the creek, holding up his phone. "I got it all on video. Want me to post it to the neighborhood Facebook page, or should I save it for the next HOA meeting?" Karen's jaw tightened. If they wanted a war, she'd give them one. But first, she needed to get out of this pool with whatever dignity she had left, which, admittedly, wasn't much. By the time the tow truck hauled Karen's waterlogged Lexus from the Hendersons' pool 3 hours later, the video had already gone viral on the Willowbrook Estates Facebook page. HOA Karen Takes a Dive had garnered 347 reactions, 89 comments, and 52 shares. Karen knew this because she'd been refreshing the page obsessively from her backup phone while wrapped in Mrs. Henderson's floral beach towel. "The insurance adjuster will be here tomorrow," the tow truck driver informed her, trying unsuccessfully to hide his grin. "Never seen a car in a pool before. Usually it's the other way around. Pools and cars after floods." Karen ignored him, her attention focused on the growing crowd of neighbors who seemed to be treating her misfortune like dinner theater. The Petrowskis had brought lawn chairs. The Johnsons were sharing popcorn. Even cranky old Mr. Fitzgerald, who never spoke to anyone, was leaning on his cane by the bridge debris, chuckling. "This changes nothing," Karen announced to the assembled crowd, her voice cutting through their chatter like a rusty knife. "The violation still stands. The Hendersons' deck railing is still 0.2 inches too high." A collective groan rose from the neighbors. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her phone still recording. "Karen, your car just destroyed a 40-year-old bridge and turned the Hendersons' pool into a car wash. Maybe we could focus on that." "The bridge was structurally unsound," Karen retorted, wringing pool water from her blazer sleeves. "I'm actually doing the HOA a favor by exposing this safety hazard. We could have faced a massive liability lawsuit." "You drove backward off a bridge while taking pictures," shouted Bob Martinez. "The only liability here is your driving. The only exception here is you." interrupted Mrs. Henderson, standing up with surprising dignity for someone whose pool had recently hosted a sedan. You've turned this neighborhood into a police state. We moved here for community, not constant surveillance. Karen felt something shift in the room's energy. These weren't just angry neighbors anymore. They were a unified front. For the first time in her HOA presidency, she was genuinely outnumbered. All in favor of removing Karen Weatherby as HOA president? Gary asked reluctantly. Hands shot up throughout the room. Karen counted them frantically. 27, 31, 42. She stopped counting when she realized even the teenagers were raising their hands. Motion carries, Gary announced with obvious relief. Karen, you'll need to surrender all HOA documents, keys, and equipment by Sunday. As the crowd began to disperse, chattering excitedly about their victory, Karen remained seated. Her laptop screen still displayed slide 1 of her 47-slide defense presentation. All those hours of preparation, all those municipal code references, all those precedent cases, worthless. But as she packed her binders and unplugged her laptop, Karen noticed something interesting. The crowd was breaking into small groups, already arguing about who should be the new president and what the priorities should be. The Chens wanted to focus on landscaping. The Martinez family was pushing for a neighborhood playground. The Hendersons just wanted their pool fixed. Karen smiled. A real smile, not her usual thin-lipped expression of disapproval. These people had no idea what they'd just taken on. Running an HOA wasn't about popularity contests and community barbecues. It was about difficult decisions, unpopular enforcement, and the thankless job of maintaining order. Give them 6 months of trying to collect dues, enforce parking regulations, and deal with the Fitzgerald's aggressive rose bushes. They'd come crawling back, begging her to resume control. Karen tucked her emergency binder under her arm and walked toward the exit. As she passed the Hendersons, she paused. Your deck railing is still 0.2 inches too high, she said quietly, just loud enough for Lisa Henderson to hear. Then she walked into the parking lot, already planning her comeback campaign.